Welcome to Small Talk. My name is David Shaw. Over the weekend we went on a walk in beautiful, beautiful countryside, and along the way I collected these. Sweet chestnuts, fat acorns, and these tiny, tiny beech nuts. They are reminders of autumn, of fruiting. We have our harvests at this time of the year because many things have been produced. These are the harvest, the fruiting of those trees. But this is also a time of planting, a time of seeding. The oak tree that produced this fat acorn had dropped thousands of acorns that littered the path, made a carpet along the floor of the wood. The sweet chestnut shells that had produced these were ever so prickly, but they had sprung open to reveal these beautifully coloured sweet chestnuts. All so that they could be on the ground, ready for the leaves to drop on top of them, so that they will hopefully germinate and take root. Last week I was involved in a small group in which we were talking about and discussing loneliness. One of the things this pandemic is producing and sadly harvesting is a crop of loneliness. Loneliness was already at high levels before the COVID crisis. Norina Hurt, in her book The Lonely Century, describes the rise of loneliness during this century. And the factors she identifies have been magnified for many by this pandemic. This is not only a time of harvest, but a time of sowing, a time of seeding. Now clearly, if you planted this acorn, you would get an oak tree. If you planted this sweet chestnut, you would get a sweet chestnut tree. In the case of loneliness, we do not want to plant the crop that we are presently harvesting. We need to plant something different. What should we plant? So that the crop that we produce results in relationship, self-worth, companionship, and community. In a sense, we had the beginnings of that on a Thursday evening at 8 p.m. in the early part of the pandemic. We got to know our neighbours in a far, far richer way. My wife and I were sorry to lose that community engagement, but the relationships were deeper and richer by the end of it than they were at the beginning. Now, Norina Hertz suggests some things that are almost so simple that we want to dismiss them, but we mustn't. She says we must smile more. She says we must chat more. She says we should act with more kindness towards others. And that has echoes for me of that commandment of Jesus to love our neighbour. The small group also wisely and rightly spoke about praying. Clearly we pray for people who we know to be lonely, but I also took it to be that awareness that we have when God is saying something like this into our heads. David, why don't you give Bob a ring? David, why don't you send Umwega a card? These are one of the ways that God points us to the people he wishes us to engage with. Now those are small things, but so are these. And look how big they grow.